sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to episode 2 of Court Call with Ronnie Nunn, who was an official with the NBA for 19 years and a former head of the NBA officials for 5, and now consults for NBA teams through his company, New Hoops IQ. Ronnie, thanks for joining us again in episode 2.
Coach Nick, a pleasure to be with you. Let's get right at it.
Absolutely. Let's look at our first clip, which is Michael Beasley drawing a charge playing Miami against the Celtics, and we have a question here of whether or not he was set along the baseline. So let's look at this and give us a little bit of your insight into what's happening on this play.
We can see that by the time Beasley meets Wallace, Beasley never gets there in time, and he's not perpendicular to the play. He arrives late, and you can see that he slides to his right. The official didn't get over there in time because normally he wouldn't expect a quick drive with a post player there. And yet he throws it in the post, and Wallace goes right for the baseline cut. And the officials got to read that play faster.
Do you feel like he might have gotten caught too close to the play where he really couldn't get perspective on it?
Well said, Coach. That's the issue. Every play like this, when you see it, it's a bang-bang play. You almost have to take a deep breath, run it in your head, and sort of videotape it as if you would do it on a television. You videotape the play and you go, I got it, it's a block. But he reacted so quickly because it all jumped all over him, and it was a tough play for him.
Well, let's move on to clip 2, which is Thomas Robinson getting a little bit too excited on the off-ball play where he runs into his man while Tony Parker scores. So there's two things going on here, very difficult for the refs to manage. And give us your insight into how this thing ended up playing out the way it did.
Well, it was a sequence prior. When Ayers goes and makes a screen on Robinson, it's a screen that should have been addressed as an offensive foul. He kept moving. Don't forget the official on the bottom of our screen, he's trying to look at both this new rebounding situation that's going to happen between Ayers and Robinson, because Robinson is going to give him a shot for having given him a shot previous on the screen. And he has to take his eyes from that now to see where Parker is. And when you really look at it like that, it looks as if Parker is in a continuation. So it's a very tough play. It should not have been a continuation, but I tell you what, it was a split hair thing for that official to take. The problem is he had to go back and see where the ball was. He knows he's got the fouler, but he's got to go see where the ball is. And then by the time he looks at it, it does look like a continuation.
And as a result, just in case anyone's still not clear, it's the guy getting fouled who has to shoot the free throws, not Tony Parker.
Yeah, absolutely right. The guy that's fouled is the continuation guy. He gets the N1.
Now, when you started back in the day, I have a memory of a rule being you could at most score 4 points in a possession. So if somebody hit a 3 and there was an off-ball foul that was in the penalty, they would never get 2 free throws. Not because the ball went in, but because you can only have 4 points maximum. Does that sound right, or am I making this up?
Let's say Parker, for example, shot the ball from 3, and on the flight of the ball, there is a flagrant foul, penalty 1, which is 2 shots. But Parker makes his shot. Well, since you can't score more than 4 points on that play, the player that's fouled, that goes to the free throw line, who was flagrantly fouled, gets 2 chances to make only 1 shot. So the 4-point rule, in fact, comes into play there, although he's got 2 shots to make that 1 shot.
Well, I tell you what, you can't say you don't learn something new every day on this show, because that is something that I'm sure nobody in the NBA knows right now, that you can get a 2-for-1 free throw like they used to do back in the day on a flagrant foul off the ball and the guy makes it. That's fascinating stuff. Let's look at clip 3, which is a very interesting thing to my heart as a coach and the way we respect the game. When Lance Stephenson gets called for taunting his man, and whether or not it was a very big controversy, whether people thought it really should have been called a T. So Ronnie, give us the...
Well, you know, one of the straight laws of the land is the manner in which you behave on the floor and the words that you might use. If you have any overt profane words that you use, that's a technical foul. It could also be for taunting. It's also for profanity. But in this case, this was a taunt. This is not showing the ball, do you want to try to deflect it out of my hand? This was, I'm going to put it in your face and take it back. And the official rightly sees it immediately because it's an obvious overt nature play, even though he's palming it. but he puts it at his face and pulls it back. And it's a taunt.
And as a coach, we would never advocate this because he's lucky that Tony Allen wasn't looking. He was looking for a screen. And so, which kind of defeats the purpose because normally when you taunt a guy like that, it's because he's looking at you and you want to wave the ball in his face. But I can guarantee you right now, if Tony Allen had half of an eye toward that direction, it would have been a steal.
The official sees it that it's a taunt. It's not a pass, but a taunt. And I really like the response by him because if you don't get those things straight, they build up in a player's competitive juices. And beside playing to win, he wants to play to win not for being embarrassed by somebody. And that creates a behavior problem on the floor between those two people immediately.
Well, now let's look at the next play we have here, which is Stephenson hitting a three, and he just looks right into Tony Allen, starts backing up and jawing in his face. Now the referee is right there finishing his three call.
Well, this is a play where, if you notice, the official's looking because he knows he's got somebody that's playing games. And the problem is you can't tell what he's mouthing or what he's saying, or you can't hear it. And if you notice, I mean, he's not looking at the direction of Stephenson's face. So to be wise, it's a second technical, and it would be ejection for unsportsmanlike conduct and taunting. So the official wisely says, I'm taking a chance of it's a hunch that he's taunting. And you can't make a call on a hunch. You got to make a call on something you hear or you see directly. And I think it was a wise decision to say, look, this is a second technical. This has got to come right over the plate. No tricky corners. It's got to go square over the plate for a strike. And if he doesn't have that play, he doesn't call it a strike.
Well, let's make sure we keep our eye on Lance Stephenson because people are wanting to anoint him as the next great star out of the Indiana Pacers. And I have a feeling that kind of attitude and behavior, if it's not cleaned up now, could come back to bite them. And these are words we'll have to write down and find out if it happens later on in the season or the playoffs, because it could be something that would really, really cause a problem later on.
Stephenson is a Brooklyn guy, so I know the style of that, wanting to play to win and just win all the time and what have you. But he'll be fine. I've seen him act very accordingly, and a few of these things might help him out.
All right, good, because Tony Allen is a Chicago guy, so where I'm from, so I understand he's not going to talk much, but he's going to make sure he knows people that everyone knows he's tough. Well, let's move on to clip 4, which is a clock management question between the Celtics and the Heat, where we went over this a little bit after the made basket. The clock didn't quite get set to the right time, and so there's a lot of things happening here we need to walk through. So, Ronnie, jump in here and let us know what's the first thing we need to be looking at.
You know, a basket is not a basket until it goes through the net and it comes out. And that's when you count it, and that's when you try to stop the clock. And the clock operator is the one that stops the clock, and the officials on the floor look to see if that clock was stopped appropriately. And when you're talking about stopping your clock at this time in the game, you're talking about 0.3 seconds that the human person can react, no matter who it is, in stopping a clock, for example. So it ended up coming down to 1 second, which is feasible. I mean, by the time he saw that it got through, maybe his eyes were a little blocked, the timer, and he stopped it at 1 o'clock. And I think the officials felt that was a pretty good stoppage.
Can you review the clock's position after a made basket in that situation?
One of the triggers to looking at that clock is having that clock run carelessly to 0. Had it done that, the officials could have gone back and realized it kind of just got through that net at 1.5 or 1.4. And I think that they could have put it right back to that.
So now the play keeps going where they have to foul immediately. It goes into Wade, and they wrap him up. What happens after that, though, is that the clock runs out to 0, like you just described, after the whistle blew. So clearly there was some miscommunication, or whatever you want to call it, in Miami, and this is what they ended up doing to review. So walk us through that and how that process got to the 0.6.
Yeah, well, the officials know right away that the foul occurs so quickly that the clock needs to stop. So then it went to 0. And that gave a trigger and a vehicle and a legal way to go to the monitor and now see what happened on this play. And I think they make a very good decision to go about 4/10. Remember, you have to have at least 3, and then they added 1 just for the fact that, you know, again, the human instinct and the human action of the foul was pretty good at 4/10.
Well, now let's walk through the next bit of the rule, which was confusing to a lot of people, where Dwayne Wade ended up missing the first free throw, and now with the 0.6 seconds left, decides to miss it intentionally. So what happens, and what rule did he end up violating?
In this case, he threw a ball, understandably, hard against the backboard, so maybe it would kick back at him and, he can get to the ball. But the bottom line is that it did not hit the ring. If it doesn't hit the ring, it's an automatic violation. And in an automatic violation, the clock cannot run anyway, so it would remain at 0.6. And then, of course, the timeout and the option to move up court and the great play that finishes, as you know.
Well, let's move on to clip 5, which is the game-winning 3 by Steve Blake against Houston, where we were able to catch Steve Nash holding Jeremy Lin down and out of the play. So let's walk through this and tell us your insights and what you see and how the referees had to decide what to call for this.
This is a story about, do officials put their whistles in their pockets at the end of the game? And it'll always come up because of the nature of how these plays evolve and how they kind of let themselves out of the barn and how it looks. And then goes the people thinking of controversies. But the bottom line on this play is pretty simple. And in this case, Jeremy Lin and Steve Nash are the key people. And what happens is Steve Nash is the guy that's going to set a screen for Blake in a way, because he's not the guy that's going to be shooting. But Lin is so involved with Nash that he wants to stay with him like glue. So as Nash kind of grabs onto him, okay, that's sort of illegal. And then all of a sudden, Lin doesn't demonstrate that he's being grabbed, but also grabs onto him because he doesn't want to lose him. Well, the interpretation is, yes, you can call it double foul, but you got to kind of wait, because we have moments when people are locked in and you can't really discern who's the wrong person yet. And both players are involved with something that ended up being nothing. And that piece is, to me, a very good no call.
Okay. The key here, what I like what you said, is that Lin would need to be fighting through that screen and demonstrating, look, Steve Nash is holding me, for any chance of that call being made. These are the things that, as a coach, you need to clean up, and it's not so bad to lose in the third or fourth game of the year if you can clean it up now and then not get beaten that way in the playoffs. And in clip 6, let's look at Corey Brewer's turnover. This is a very fresh play right from last night, where Chris Paul gets a steal, and it was very controversial for a lot of the Minnesota fans because they felt like it was a blatant foul and didn't get the call because I guess they were on the road. So walk us through what you see here and whether or not it was a good call.
First of all, this was a tough transition play for everybody involved. The ball becomes loose, and now Brewer gets it. It's a key time in the game, and the officials have to respond. And obviously, the person that should get to the baseline really can't, and that's the official at the top of our screen, because turnovers of this type, sometimes you just can't beat the players down court. And I would probably have preferred him to let it go by him and read it, but they end up both going, and they end up being a little bit of a stack. What I mean is, one can only see the back of the play of each of the players that are involved. Brewer is to the back of the official at the top, and Chris Paul is has his back facing the official at the bottom of the screen. So the bottom line is, these two players are in a position where the officials are not in the best position they'd like to be. Now, the nature of the strip, it's a very aggressive strip. And he gets it, and he actually gets it with his hand first, his left arm. But as he completely wants to gather it, he comes across Brewer's head. And that play is still part of the same play. Yes, he had the ball initially, but he finished the same play with a wrap to the head. And that's what needs the foul to be called on this play. Unfortunately, it's a tough play, and the officials had to deal with a tough play. But it happened quick. It looked like a steal. I mean, after all, the announcer thought it was the greatest steal he'd ever seen. And at first glance, it looks very, very good. But as you look at it and you see the positioning, you realize that, Chris Paul did get a piece of Brewer's head, and that's a foul.
As a coach, we try and put our players in positions where the referees can't matter. They can't be in positions to do something that you might think is wrong or make it blow a play. And when you watch Corey Brewer, this all unravels when he brings the ball all the way out, away from his body, right, giving it to Chris Paul. And that would never be a move. Now, I know what he was trying to do. There is a move where you step through and you kind of rip the ball through up and above and around the defender. Well,
yes.
Chris Paul, in a genius move, steps away before he can kind of get into the ball through there, and as a result brings it right through. It was never a good decision anyway to do that kind of move against Chris Paul in the open court. So I have to say that Rick Adelman probably was going to look at that and say, you know what, we might have gotten the bad end of that stick, but the bottom line is, Corey, you can't do a move like that where you expose the ball and get us in a situation where now the referee does come into play.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm glad you mentioned it because I had thought about it. And, don't forget that the officials also see this. They see a ball that you would think you want to put your body between the ball and the defender. And yet, Brewer's style of wanting to maybe make contact or play this high rip-through move worked to his disadvantage with a very savvy player like Chris Paul. If Chris first gets that ball, it's a pretty clean ball. And I think that's when all bets were off for the officials. And they figured, hey, here's the steal. The steal is right there. And they probably thought that contact, as quick as it happened, was incidental.
Well, Ronnie, I think we can finish up this episode with shining a lot of light on a lot of plays and educating everybody about what it means to be a referee and what their decisions that occur and how hard it can be. And you know what? Every time we do these episodes, I'm more and more impressed with how accurate they are, and the decisions that they make are way more often right than wrong.
Well, I'm glad you said that because the plays that come up wrong sometimes are plays that are very difficult. You don't know what's going on in the process. So officiating has pieces to it of the start, the development, and the finish of plays. It's a great challenge every night. It may be a great challenge to play against your opponent, but it is a greater challenge to play the game against the 10 opponents as to what they do wrong. That third team has a challenge every night, and it is tough to get wins in that win column, but they get a lot of them all the time.
Absolutely. Well, sports fans, thanks for joining us on another episode of Court Call. Ronnie, again, terrific stuff, great insights, and we'll be looking forward to our next episode next week. Don't miss out, sports fans, because at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?
Well, I'm in.